Hello everyone. Welcome. It's really good to have you all here. I am Priyanshi, and I currently work as a research associate for Australian Taxpayers Alliance. Today we have with us, we're really honored to have with us Dr. Patricia Hohlbein. She's the Vice President of Training and Events at Atlas. She joined Atlas Network following a successful career in higher education at Ohio Dominican University and Otterbein University. And today she'll be talking about leadership. We're so honored to have you, Dr. Hohlbein, here with us. And the floor is all yours. But before that, I'm really sorry. Yeah, one more thing. It's for all the participants that before the session begins, I'd like to encourage all of you to keep this a very engaging session. So keep on interacting via chat box. Keep on posting all your questions in the chat box and make sure that you introduce yourselves with your name and location while asking those questions. And these questions will be later on dealt with by Doctor. And thank you so much. The floor is all yours now, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much. And please call me Patty.
Patty.
It's my pleasure to be here, and greetings to you from actually a beautiful sunny day here in the US. So I'm looking forward to our session this morning and the whole conference. It's already been absolutely delightful. So please put your questions in the chat box. While I'm presenting, I can't see the chat box, but I have some folks from Atlas Network with me that will be helping get your questions answered. So we will get to those, but if you'll just indulge me for a bit, we'll go through some of the presentation, and then I'll be delighted to have discussion and take questions with you. So in talking about leadership being authenticity and not style. Let me figure out a way to get my slides to move forward here. Hang on, sorry. There we go. So the overview of the session, just some of the basic concepts as you might guess, talking about leadership and authenticity overall, and then talking about some more specifics of how do you actually lead with purpose, meaning, and values. What does it mean to actually be an authentic leader and your own person? And then what might it look like for you to leave a legacy of positive impact? So first things first, when you look up a lot of different definitions of leadership, there's at least 65 and counting. And I'm sure that there's probably over 70 by the time I actually put this number on the slide yesterday. But in Nordhaus's definition, it's talking about it being a process of individual influences of groups towards a common goal. So this really resonates however you want to slice it and dice it and make the presentation. The concept is the same, that leadership at its very essence is very highly relational. So put into Google a search for leadership, and my results yielded 247 trillion results. Yeah, that's trillion. Lots of people writing about leadership, talking about leadership, overwhelming nearly, right? And then, so I said, okay, well, let's narrow it down a little bit. What about authentic leadership? That yielded 910,000 results. So there's lots of research and opinions on leadership, authentic leadership. What do those things mean? There's some myths that have been floating around for quite a long time, and I think are still perpetuated. And I kind of wanted to address a few of those up front, with the notion that a lot of times people had the idea that leaders were actually, you had to be born with certain attributes or characteristics to actually be a leader. And that is false. And it's not just my opinion. Research has proven this out, that leaders are actually made. And we'll talk about this later, that you have things inherently in your being that whether you develop them or not, that's a different story in terms of being born versus making yourself into a leader. And it's also a journey and not a destination. So this is more the marathon versus the sprint in terms of that concept. Like, you don't arrive at being a leader. It's an ever evolving process, because we're ever evolving beings. And then it's also not a position of just power and authority. Yes, you may be defined as a leader by your title or position, but being a true leader is about influence and people actually trusting you and choosing to follow you. So it's really about a conscious choice. Now, like I said, folks may have to follow you because of a position of power of authority, but that doesn't necessarily make you a leader by definition of choice. So then what is leadership? It's all centered, because human beings, we're highly relational creatures, right? So it's centered around trust. You earn trust every day in all the small and the big things that occur in your relationships, whether this be personal or professional, right? So everything centers around that. Then values, what are your values? What are your core values? And can people rely on the fact that they understand who you are and what you're about, and that in trusting you, that you're going to make consistent decisions? Integrity. This goes beyond just the simple knowing right from wrong, or the famous adage of doing the right thing even when nobody's looking or nobody would find out. So that encapsulates a lot of what integrity is about. Predictability is actually a very positive thing in leadership. It might be initially perceived as being a negative, but here's what it means in terms of true leadership and building that trust. If you're predictable in how you're going to respond, and I'm saying respond, not react, because reactive is very much a pretty quick kind of knee-jerk to something, versus responding, which is a little more of a thoughtful process. If you're predictable in that if somebody has to bring you bad news, and they, you want your people to be honest with you at all times, right? So that's a two-way street of trust, but they know that you're going to respond with thoughtfulness and integrity. Then the predictability helps build your team in more innovation and creativity. It's not based on fear of folks wondering, I'm not sure how he or she is going to react to this particular news, be it good or bad. And then caring. Most of the time, folks don't really consider the concept of caring as being a part of being a leader in an organization, but it actually is. When you genuinely care about people and care about them beyond just, can you do the job, but as human beings outside of functioning in that role, that builds deeper levels of trust. And again, it gets back to that circle of creativity and innovation, and the whole organization benefits from that, because you have high levels of trust and engagement then. Ken Blanchard, really smart guy, talking about, leading people being the opposite of trying to control them. So talking again about this, the pathway and the journey to gaining trust through your own integrity, and then you're developing their potential. So the affirmation part of this too is not, don't misconstrue this as being patronizing or false praise. It really needs to be genuine. So you're affirming someone is doing a good job, and you're allowing them to have creativity in the pathway that they reach a specific goal as well. So it's not trying to control folks, but it's actually the opposite. You're gaining that trust. So then authenticity. So what is that all about? And I think we kind of, in our own minds, have some pretty good ideas of what that is, right? And being yourself seems pretty simple, but I think the being yourself part can get a little fuzzy when you're thinking about being yourself at work versus being yourself at home. But you know, the levels of authenticity should be the same, whether you're at work or at home. And the core values, this gets back to what I was saying in the leadership element too. Your core values are non-negotiable. So what are those things, you know, maybe it's 3, 4, 5 things that you just are, you know, those are deal breakers for you if an organization is behaving in a certain manner that is outside of the boundaries of those core values that you hold most true to yourself. You know, if it's the ethical, it can be a whole lot of things, and I won't pretend to try to define what that should be because that's going to be different for everybody, but really figure out for yourself, what are those core values that are non-negotiable for you? And what does it mean to have a high level of self-awareness? So this gets back to what has been referred to as emotional intelligence. So that understanding and being able to manage your emotions, and as well as understanding and managing, not manipulating, managing the emotions of others as well. So it's that, you know, really high intense level of engagement, listening, active listening, authentic listening, so that you're listening to actually hear what someone else is saying to you versus listening to respond, where you listen halfway through what somebody has said to you and you've already decided in your mind what your response is going to be. And then you completely disregard everything else that was said then. You know, people will stop sharing with us if you're not a really good, authentic, and active listener. And that your goals for yourself actually align with your core values. Your goals, the goals of the organization, when there's that alignment, then there really is, you know, high levels of intrinsic motivation, that internal motivation, and there's an ease and a genuine, I get to go to work versus I have to go to work. You really want to meet at that particular spot. So then what is an authentic leader? What are some of the traits that they possess and that you possess? So being self-aware, being passionate. You know, do you really care about what it is you're doing, or are you just, you know, you're technically skilled, you don't really like the work, you're just good at it, and you're just getting it done and going home at the end of the day? I mean, when you're passionate, that is contagious as well. So find things that you can really be passionate about. Now, we can't be passionate about every single element of our jobs, right? So if writing reports is part of your role and you don't really like writing reports, that's, you know, we just have certain things that we have to do. But by and large, the majority of it, you know, when you're being authentic, that you have a passion and a connection with what you're doing. The consistency, again, back to what I was talking about earlier, it's very important to be consistent and predictable. Relational, again, goes along with the active listener as well. And then that strong moral compass, that connection back to the values. It's really important to be consistent between your word and deed so that folks understand beyond a shadow of a doubt what you're going to do and how you're going to respond. So Simon Sinek, he's done a bunch of TED Talks, written a lot on leadership, really kind of an interesting and fun guy to watch a TED Talk on. But this quote really resonates in talking about that duality. You know, if you're different at work than you are at home, in one of those two places, you're lying. So just think about that for a minute. Now, we're not going to be our exact selves at work as we are at home because we have different levels of relationships with people. But this is talking about being at your core. You know, your values, your moral compass, your ethical perspective, should not change between home and work. So all this talking about what is authenticity, leadership, and now kind of talking about your lived experiences. This is your life experience, right? So we're going to be shaped and reshaped across our lifetimes, and no two people's pathways are going to be exactly the same, right? So there are going to be some really high impact moments in our lives that really reshape how we look at leadership skills and style. There's going to be really great leaders in our lives. There's going to be really awful leaders in our lives. And we're going to learn a lot from both, right? So thinking about moments of impact across your lived experience. So now I'm going to ask you to kind of think a bit about what's called a crucible experience. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with this concept of the crucible, but this is actually a crucible really tests you to the depths of your being and limits, where you really learn who you are and what you want to become. So, it can be a true trial. What did you learn? How did the experience shape your perspectives, ideas, and behaviors? So take just a minute here and reflect upon, was there a pivotal moment that really was defining in how you looked at things, or your perspective of defining maybe what your passion became clear to you, of what your goals were, where you wanted to go with your professional life, your personal life. Because again, remember, we can't just have split ourselves and half of us is our personal life and the other half is our profession. So what are some of the, think about those, and you may have had more than one crucible experience. And this can center on, really positive experiences, or it can be things that were very difficult too, that can shape you. But the point is, when you had that particular experience, it really kind of changed how you were thinking about things. So now let's talk for a few minutes about leading with purpose, meaning, and values. So what does it talk about when we say we're going to lead with purpose? This sounds really great, and we hear these things a lot or read them a lot in books or hear them in talks. But when you're talking about leading with purpose, it's being aligned, because the idea is when you're all headed towards a similar goal and striving for greatness together, you get that energy, the group energy together, and then self-interest becomes secondary to what we are collectively doing to actually achieve our stated purpose. And but really binds people to strive for greatness together, not individually. So what is that's going to purpose is going to bind you together? So purpose is created when we can answer, excuse me, some of these questions. So why do we exist? Answering these in the context of your organization. So why does your organization exist? And why is that important? What would happen if your organization no longer existed? And why do you devote your creative energies to this organization? So this is essentially answering the big question of, so what? So at Atlas Network, we need to be able to answer all of these things, right? The so what of what would happen if we no longer existed? What would be the net impact, local, regionally, globally? And why would you want to devote your energies to this particular organization? So really being able to answer those questions, not only in the context of your organization, but in the context of yourself as well, as a leader, putting your trust, you're aligning your values and trust within an organization as well, right? So when you choose to be within an organization, you're aligning your reputation with theirs. So do your passions, does your purpose align with theirs? And can you answer all of the so what's of that? So then talking about leading with meaning. So this is an and proposition. This is not an either or. So when you're leading with meaning, great leaders focus on each person and the overall organization. This has to be very purposeful, right? Very integrated, top of mind, inclusive, right? So it doesn't just happen. Things don't just magically blend together. It takes effort on both parts and awareness, back to all of the things I was talking about with self-awareness, shared passion, values, that predictability, those kind of things, so that those relationships are strengthened individually and organizationally. So the next bullet here talking about the pursuit of truth. So think about, this is really important, pursuit of truths that serve the organization. Because when you're serving the organization is actually all the people. It's not some, ethereal being or building. It's actually the people when we talk about the organization. You want folks who are curious, innovative, creative, that they're sparked to have those kind of things emerging in themselves. So if there's a culture of fear, that is going to quelch curiosity, innovation, and creativity, because those things involve a certain amount of calculated risk, right? To be willing to kind of put yourself out there a little bit and try something, and knowing that it might not always work out the first go round, right? So how do you keep that spark? You build a culture of trust, right? Trust, highly relational. And then the last element is leading with values. Back to what we were talking about earlier. So leaders are actually defined by their values and character. Okay, so your moral compass, your true north. Integrity, when you look at all the things you read about leadership or listen to, the one value that it comes back to that's required in every authentic leader is integrity. That person that's going to do tell the whole truth all the time. So here's one of the things. It's not just the absence of lying. It's telling the whole truth, as painful as it may be. So this is not saying, I'm going to be brutally honest with you, because usually when you say you're going to be brutally honest with someone, it means you're just going to brutalize them. But this is talking about, for example, in terms of leading with integrity and values. If there is some really challenging news happening within the organization, so let's say maybe there's a financial issue or whatnot, and sharing that information of like, here's something that's going on, the economy, these are some of the influences it's having on our organization. These are the things that we're doing, so that there's that transparency as well. Don't pretend like bad things don't happen within organizations and with people, because they do. It's just a natural part of life. And if you try to sweep things under the rug or shield folks from them, you'll lose trust, which is at the essence of everything with people choosing to follow you as a leader, not just because they fear you because of your position of power or authority, but if you had absolutely no power or authority, would somebody choose to actually follow you? Roy Disney, who is the brother of the infamous Walt Disney, who created Walt Disney World and stuff, had this famous quote of, "It's not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are." So thinking about that contextually as a leader as well, when you're perfectly centered and understand what your values are, and you can be authentic in your interactions all the time. And this means too, with a level of vulnerability as well, right? So not being able to share with folks that you don't know all the answers to everything. I mean, no person on the planet can possibly know the answers to everything. But as a leader, you should be working on refining your skills of knowing how to find those answers and saying, you know what, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I have some things to check out and let me get back to you on that, is way more credible and engenders trust more than making up a response to something that you're not quite sure whether it's accurate or not. If you're lucky and it is true, that's, maybe it's great. I don't know that it's great, because then your poor choice of not being sure that you're accurate in what you're saying would be continue because you got it right that time. So just thinking about making sure you're having that high level of integrity, that there's values alignment, and that you can be trusted, and you earn people's trust every day. So what if your work could truly shift the conversations at the local, regional, and national and global levels? So think about what it would look like for you as a leader, as also, leaders also follow too. So there is that leader followership, but we won't get into the theories around that. But what would that look like? You think about back to your Crucible moment, those experiences, your lived experiences. How do you bring those things forward into making an impact, leaving that legacy that we're going to talk about in a moment, and still at the same time make sure that you're being your own person? So what does being your own person mean? In terms of being an authentic leader, it's not trying to emulate someone else, right? You have to be yourself over time. Hone your style to be effective in leading different types of people in different types of environments and situations. You must be able to adapt your style to fit different situations, recognizing that there are times to be inspiring and motivating, and times to be tough about people and financial decisions. Use of adaptive styles is not actually inauthentic. In fact, it's a strength to be able to nuance your styles to the demands of the situation and know how and when to deploy different styles, right? So being aware of your weaknesses means accepting your shadow side. What does your shadow side mean? This is not like, you have this super secret dark side that you didn't know about, but that there's pros and cons to everything, right? So there's not perfection. We don't just have strengths. So your shadow side is your weaknesses, right? The problem that really kind of percolates here is when we get so eager to win the approval of others that you then try to cover up shortcomings, and you sacrifice authenticity to gain respect and admiration of colleagues, right? If you attempt to cover up your weaknesses, let me assure you, you are only fooling yourself, because oftentimes weaknesses are very easiest seen by others. So adapt your style, be aware of your weaknesses, and developing a leadership style that's consistent with your character and personality. Brian Tracy puts it very well: becoming the kind of leader that people would follow voluntarily, even if you had no title or position. And this is what we're slowly unfolding as you travel your journey of authentic leadership. You know, what would be the story of your legacy? What will your legacy be? When we think about great leaders and those who've left an impact and a legacy for lifetimes well beyond their own, I'm sure you recognize a lot of people in this collage. Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Albert Einstein, Jesse Owens. Lots of people. Now, I'm not saying that we have to try to be at the level of these people, but these are examples. These people were just people, right? That ordinary people that did extraordinary things because they were passionate, true to themselves, right? So your legacy is going to be defined by the passion and impact of the people you influence. So what do you want your legacy to be? Think about developing a legacy roadmap, if you will. So this is kind of back to some of what Stephen Covey said years ago, of beginning with the end in mind. So what do you envision as your legacy? What do you want that mark to be? How will people answer? How will you answer the so what of what it is you're endeavoring to do with your life and your career, and being that authentic leader that people can really say, you know, I'm a better person for having interacted with you. You helped me to see other things, and then thereby passing along your influence so that those people pass along the influence as well in very positive ways. That is all I have for you this morning in terms of a formal presentation, because I definitely wanted to leave time for Q&A. So if you have questions or just would like to discuss some things, I'm glad to chat with you about those now. And if you think of something later and you desire to send me an email, my email is at the bottom of this presentation, and you can send that to me as well. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'll take questions now.
Hey, Patty. So we've had a couple questions come through. So the first one is from Emily. She's calling in from Sydney, and she's asking if you could speak a little bit more to how you would recommend encouraging some of her subordinates to take on these leadership traits. And she said specifically a real understanding of the purpose of the organization.
Okay, great. Thanks, Emily. I appreciate the question. Great questions. So encouraging some of her employees to take on the leadership traits. So one of those things too is actually working and being more purposeful in the sharing of the different leadership traits and characteristics, right? Because you can share with them what yours are and which ones you most identify with, but to encourage them to explore and discover some of those leadership traits, and then help them develop a plan for actually developing those. So that you can have conversations with them, which also builds trust, right? That you're invested in their development as much as you're invested in the development of the organization and your own personal growth. So that would be one way. And one of the things, and this is actually something that we've been talking about is you can develop with them a personal or professional development plan. So have them envision, you know, what is their personal and professional vision for themselves? What's the mission? You know, how do they view their own legacy? You know, what do they want to have their own legacy be? And then part two, I believe you asked about the understanding of the purpose of the organization. So this, I think, could be answering those questions that I posed earlier of, you know, why does your organization exist? You know, what would it mean if your organization no longer existed? Going back and looking at, you know, can you answer the so what? And then how do you convey the so what of the existence of your organization and the purpose of your organization to others? So what are those key elements? What's the legacy that the organization wants to leave as well, right? So if your organization no longer existed tomorrow, would anybody miss you? And this is a really hard question to kind of turn the mirror to yourselves and truly answer this, right? You have to be honest with yourself of, well, yes, they will. And okay, you're saying yes. So now answer the why. You know, so what is the why of the organization? Why do you exist? And what are you trying to do? Emily, does that answer your questions? If you have follow-up ones, I'm glad to take those as well. Okay, Alex, do we have questions from some other folks?
Yeah, we do. And for everyone else that's tuning in, if you have questions, like we said at the beginning of the call, please feel free to type those in the chat box. So another question that we received is someone asking about how you can lead if you're not in a traditional leadership position. So maybe it's kind of flipping the switch on that last question.
Right. Yes. So leading from where you are, this is a fantastic question. And, you know, there's also books and articles written about this, right? You know, managing your manager, leading up and those things. But this gets back to the trust piece too, right? So would anybody choose to follow you if you had no power or authority? So really, in building yourself and your leadership skills, you don't have to have that title, right? So that high level of integrity and that engendering trust with other people in all of your interactions, right? So that you're an active listener. I have never learned anything when I was actually talking. I only learn things when I'm listening. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. You know, that active listening state is a very practiced art as well, because there's a lot of tendencies to want to prepare a response in advance. So it's really about you building your skills and then finding those opportunities to lead in an informal way, but to lead out with, you know, offering ideas, innovation, creativity, have a high level of curiosity, you know, asking the what if or what about questions. The other thing is, in terms of building, you know, your leadership skills and position, is to, when somebody offers an idea to you, if you say yes, but, then you have automatically discounted what they just said, because you're going to say something counter to what they said because you said yes, but. One very small change in language and your own thought process is to say yes and. So you're affirming and you're building on what has already been offered to you. So by virtue of those things, you're building your own mindset, your own level of confidence, increasing your curiosity and knowledge as well. You'll be amazed at how interactions will really unfold once you kind of really practice the active listening and the affirmative responses. Any
Patty,
other
that was-
questions, Alex? Well, we still have a few minutes.
Yeah, we do. So another thing that I was thinking would be good if you wanted to talk about is just what has been your best learning experience from another leader? So what have you learned from someone else?
Oh, okay. So me in
Yes.
particular. Okay, so this gets back to
So, like, I didn't have any haters because I didn't matter. No one cared enough to hate on me. So when you get people who hate on you, you have to be like, wow, I'm really important. They're spending their day hating on me. So you kind of have to realize that comes with the territory, and to not kind of take it personally. You have to kind of realize that they are insulting this other person. I've tried to kind of be like, okay, they're insulting who they think you are. They're not insulting you. If that makes any sense, I don't know if it does or not. But I always try to keep my cool, because one thing I've realized is that when you are arguing with a hater or someone that doesn't like you, you're not actually arguing with that person. That person is probably not going to change their opinion about you or what you're talking about. What you're really doing is trying to get people who are reading the thread, who are reading the comments, to be on your side. So I try not to insult the person, even though deep down I really want to insult the person because they're stupid. I don't.
I think this is from the main feed.
Look bad to other people.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'm just going to go ahead and
who may not be
mute
complimenting,
her.
who may not be liking.
okay.
All right.
I wasn't
Go
sure
ahead,
what was
Patty.
okay.
I think it might be feedback from the main session.
Okay, I wasn't sure what was happening, so I thought I would just wait. So for me, I would say, there was a really fantastic leader that I had the pleasure to work with. And I say with because that's how he made all of us feel, even though I was several tiers below him early in my career, but really created this culture of candor and transparency and, wanted that spark of curiosity and innovation and creativity. And it was actually, hold your breath on this one. It was okay to fail as long as you learn something from the failure. And that's something that I always carried forward in my personal life too, because that really emboldened a lot of us to be, not throw caution to the wind with certain things, but it really freed up any of those mental barriers that we create for ourselves that, this is the president of the organization, and if I mess up, that I'm going to be gone. Calculated risks are good, and that's what helps build innovation and creativity. And unless you have that culture that really reinforces that, once there's if there's heavy punitive hand for anything that deviates from the norm or that isn't 100% guaranteed to be successful all of the time, then whether you say it or not, over time, the creativity and innovation is going to be completely quelched. So I would say early on, for me, I had a really great leader who not only talked about all of these elements of being an authentic leader, which it wasn't even called that back then, but really demonstrated them in every day-to-day interaction. It was very impressive how even in a large organization, he knew everybody's name. So, that makes a big impact as well, to be able to be highly relational and truly, back to the point I was making earlier about caring about people, that makes you feel good when somebody remembers your name and interacts with you on a meaningful level. So good question.
That's great. And then, so we don't have any more, but I was wondering really quickly if you could just maybe share 1 or 2 resources on authentic leadership that people might be able to check out on their own.
Sure. There's a couple of ones that I would, that are pretty
Patty,
easy.
I'm really sorry to interrupt. Just a gentle reminder that there's just 10 minutes left for the session. So if you can wind up the live session, and then you can carry on with the normal session after that. So we'll be winding up the live session in another 10 minutes, just a reminder.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah,
no worries.
Carry on.
Yes, so great question on resources, and I can share some other things out that can be shared through the conference as well later. But there's one really great book. If you know, I don't know how many people are readers, but there's another adage that says leaders are readers, and I really agree with that. You know, trying to ingest information and perspectives that are different from your own. And so one of the books that I really enjoy is a book called Conversational Intelligence. And it's by Judith Glaser, Glaser. And she talks about how great leaders build trust. And it's actually a super easy read. And there's some really great practical points in there. And to the question earlier about how do you get purpose within your organization and have your employees take on the leadership traits, really building those conversational skills. And I would say a lot of the points and activities that are in this particular book would be an excellent launching point as well. So that would be the main thing. And in terms of, you know, I could give you lists of books and articles, but I'm not going to do that to you all. What I would say is also go check out TED Talks and listen to some of those. Simon Sinek, in particular, the gentleman that I quoted earlier, Sinek, he has a talk on how great leaders inspire action. And if you're not familiar with TED Talks, they're about a 15-minute little talk on a specific topic. They're not allowed to be pitches or like sales pitches for organizations or companies, but listen to that actual talk that he gives. And he talks about how people really get from the how and what of things to the why. And when you're getting to the why of things, that's really getting back to the heart of purpose. So I would strongly encourage you to watch that as well. Any other questions or comments for the good of the session? If not, I want to thank you all for your time and attention and your engagement, and I wish you the best in enjoying the rest of your time at the Friedman Conference. Check out all the other sessions. It's a really packed 24 hours, and it's been my absolute privilege and delight to be with you this morning. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Please email me if you have any other questions or comments. Thank you very much.